Let's continue with chapter 1. We have gone through the 18 dhatus from different perspectives with different pairs of terminologies, and so we get to know more about the perspective, about the properties and characteristics of these 18 dhatus. Now we continue with this pair of properties, pure and impure. So how many of the 18 dhatus are pure? How many are impure? Well, we have 3. We have 15 dhatus that are solely impure, meaning they can never be pure. And they are the 5 sense faculties from eye to the body, and the 5 objects from the visible form to the tangible, plus the 5 sense consciousnesses from the eye through the body consciousness. So these 15, as impure factors, need to be abandoned through the path of cultivation. And we will of course talk more about the path of vision and cultivation in the following lectures. But just remember that these 15 are pure, are impure, and always impure, and they can only be abandoned by the path of cultivation. And the remaining 3, namely the mental sense faculty, the Dhamma Dhatu, and the mental consciousness, these 3 can be either pure or impure. When they belong to the truth of suffering or the truth of origin, they are impure in nature. And when they form part in the truth of the path or the unconditioned, they are pure. So how can we understand these? First, what does it mean by saying that when they form part in the truth of path or the 3 unconditioned factors? For example, the mind and the mental events of the ordinary beings, of course, most of the time they are impure. But we also have the 5 pure aggregates. Many of them are included in Dhamma Dhatu, and these are pure factors. And also we have this mental sense faculty and the mental consciousness. When cessation due to discernment is obtained, meaning when some defilements are abandoned by the power of the path, then the mental sense faculty and the mental consciousness at the same time will also be pure. There is one thing we need to be aware of, and that is the Sarvastivadin scholars' view on the physical body of noble beings, as they do admit that the mental sense faculty, the Dhamma Dhatu, and the mental consciousness associated or belonging to the truths of the past and the unconditioned, for example, the cessation due to discernment, in the continuum of these noble beings are pure. At the same time, they don't think that the physical body of these noble beings are pure. Even they are noble beings, their physical body is still impure, and that's how Sarvastivada thinks. And because of this reason, they take refuge only to the pure wisdom that exists in the perfected beings, such as the Buddha or the Arhats. They will not take refuge to the physical body, to the physical bodies of the noble beings. And I would like to remind you that the Mahayana, also including the Diamond School, they have different views. when it comes to this point. They actually think the physical body of noble beings, like the Buddha, is also pure factor. But the Sarvastivadian scholars, they have their own reasons. They say, or they would argue, that the reason we think the physical body of a noble being is impure, because, as we recall the definition of impure, and the definition is that any factor that will increase or enhance defilements is an impure factor. So they say that, as recorded in the text of Buddhism, Devadatta's mind, Devadatta, that's you know who he is, right? He was a relative, close relative, a cousin of the Buddha, and he once caused a schism of the Sangha. So they say that, as recorded in Buddhism, Devadatta's mind has associated with a mental event of hostility, and hostility arose when Devadatta saw the Buddha, when he wanted to hurt Shakyamuni Buddha. So you see, the Buddha's body has triggered or increased the defilement in Devadatta's mental states. Therefore, they believed that the physical body of noble beings is still impure. That's their reasoning. Next, let's take a look at these two factors, these two mental events: initial inquiry and investigation. The Sanskrits are vitaka and vichara. They actually belong to indeterminate mental factors. 2 of the 8 indeterminate mental factors. Let's first define what are the meanings of vitaka and vichara. Well, vitaka, it's in English, it's an initial inquiry. It's an apprehension of an object in a very, how to say, for example, when you see a bottle on a table, that's a first inquiry. That's the initial inquiry, the first impression. That's vitaka. And then next, you would like to investigate further on that bottle. You want to investigate the object in details. For example, you start to examine what material that bottle is made of, or some tiny fractures on the bottle, and so on. That kind of investigation of the object in details, and we call it vichara, or investigation. So how do these 2 factors exist in the 18 Dhatus? First, the 5 sense consciousnesses, from the eye through the body consciousnesses, they always involve both vitaka and vichara. And the reason is that these 2 are gross and they turned always toward outside. And we say 5 if in Kamadhatu, in the desire realm. And there are only 3 in if we are talking about, for example, the first dhyana. Then we have to exclude the nose and tongue consciousnesses. As we mentioned earlier, these 2 does not exist. The odor, the taste, these 2 consciousnesses, they do not exist in Rupa Dhatu. And if we look at the Mano Dhatu, the Dhamma Dhatu, and the mental consciousness, these 3 can be associated with both vitaka and vichara. For example, in Kama Dhatu and in first dhyana, the Mano Dhatu and the mental consciousness, they are both associated with this initial inquiry and investigation. While in Dhamma Dhatu, we have to exclude these two themselves. First, the reason is that Vitaka or Vichara, they do not associate with themselves at the same time. And in Dhamma Dhatu, they also, for example, the many of the associated mental events, they can arise together with Vitaka and Vichara. And I'll give you an example is that when a good mental event like faith, when it arises, we will have more than 20 other mental events arising together, including Vitaka and Vichara. And we would also have another case that these three could be free from Vitaka, but associated with Vichara. For example, the Vitaka in Kama Dhatu. The reason, or the Vitaka in Kama Dhatu or in the first dhyana, and the reason it is free from Vitaka is, as mentioned earlier, it cannot correspond, it cannot associate with itself. It can associate with other mental factors, but not itself at the same time. Also, the intermediate meditation of first dhyana, in that intermediate meditation, it is away from Vitaka, but the Vichara remains. So the Manodhatu, the mental consciousness, and the associated Dhammadhatu, except Vichara, will be free from Vitaka, but associated with Vichara. And the next circumstance is those factors free from both Vitaka and Vichara. So first, inside the Dhammadhatu, we have 18 non-associated factors. They are the 14 dissociated factors from the mind, plus the non-informative, or the avijñapti, plus the 3 unconditioned. Also the Vichara in the intermediate meditation, as it does not have this, it does not have Vitaka, it does have Vichara. However, Vichara itself cannot associate with itself. So Vichara in the intermediate meditation is also free from both. And from the second dhyana, always all the way upwards, the second, the third, the fourth dhyanas, plus the 4 spheres in the formless realm, all these are free from both Vitaka and Vichara. And then we have these 5 sense faculties and the 5 objects. These materials, they're always free from both. Because they're not mind, they're not mental events, they're not associated Dhammadhatu, so it is impossible for them to associate with any of these two. Okay, that is about the initial inquiry and the investigation. In some Chinese commentaries, they also use metaphors to help us understand. The initial inquiry is like a cat chasing a rat. So it is very coarse. While the investigation is like a cat waiting for a rat coming out of his hole. This takes a very closer look, closer investigation, closer attention, and so on. So that's about the initial inquiry and investigation. Next, let's take a look at this group of concepts, which is very important. They are the effect of retribution, effect of accumulation, and effect of uniform outflow. Let's take a look at their definitions first. Effect of retribution. They are They refer to ripening of good or bad karma. For example, faculties in higher or lower realms, or health conditions in this life due to past karma. Like if we have good karmas in our previous lives, or bad karma, they will give non-defined retributive effect like the body and appearance in this life. And when it comes to accumulation, effect of accumulation, that are accumulated through diet or sleep or meditation and so on. It is limited in this life. It has nothing to do with previous life. So if we eat today, our body will be nourished. If we don't eat today, if we skip all 3 meals, if we don't eat meals for 2 days, 3 days, our body might have some problem because it needs to be nourished through diet or sleep and so on. Well, meditation is also a good way to maintain the body. So this kind of effect, we call it the effect of accumulation. It is also very important to us. And the third type of effect is called effect of a uniform outflow, that is produced by a cause similar to its effect. Basically, it is applicable to all conditioned factors, except the first pure moment in the continuum of a noble being in a path of vision, which we will talk about it later. But the reason that one is excluded is because the previous moment, it is a factor that is impure in nature. So an impure factor cannot have a uniform outflow of a pure factor because they're not the same nature. Because otherwise, all the other conditioned factors have this uniform outflow. And now let's take a look at the 18 Dhatus. First, the 5 sense faculties are effects of retribution and accumulation. And when I say that these 5 sense faculties are these 2 effects, they are actually also effects of uniform outflow. But the meaning, that layer of meaning as being effect of uniform outflow has already been covered by the effects of retribution and accumulation. Because any factor that is an effect of retribution and accumulation must also be an effect of uniform outflow. So we just don't mention it here. For example, the eyes of humans or animals, or the sense faculties maintained or recovered through food or sleeping. So these are examples we have been familiar with now. And sound. Sound is an effect of accumulation and uniform outflow, but it's not an effect of retribution because there is a lack of continuity for sound. You can start to make a sound anytime you want, and you can stop it anytime you want. So it can proceed or stops with intention. That's not how an effect of retribution can do. For example, your body is an effect of retribution. You cannot say, I want my body to remain, and I want my body to stop, to disappear immediately. You cannot do it. But a sound you can control with your intention. Therefore, it is not an effect of a retribution. In fact, sound is the only dhatu that is definitely not an effect of retribution. All the other 17 dhatus can be, and not necessarily, but can be an effect of retribution. But sound is definitely not. But then we have a question. Because in the sutra, it mentioned one thing. It says, if someone hands bells, those that can make very enjoyable sound. If someone hangs the bells, for example, on stupas that honor Buddha or Bodhisattvas, or praise the three treasures by chanting or dharanis and so on, that will bring about nice voice in their next lives. So how would you explain that? Isn't that an effective retribution by good karma in their previous life? And the answer is no, it is not an effective retribution. It is just a way to say that the good karma in their previous life, like hanging bells or praising the three treasures, of course they are good karma. What they really bring about in the next lives is not an effect of retribution as the sound, but it brings about good throat as an effective retribution. And because this one has got good throat, therefore he can have very good sound. So you see, they have just neglected to say the throat, to make the sutra more concise. Next, let's take a look at the 8 unobstructed dhatus. These 8 are the Dhamma dhatu plus the 7 mental sense elements. They are effects of retribution or uniform outflow. Because, for example, the ripening of good and bad karma, like variations in human intelligence, or if you compare, for example, the retributive consciousness of humans, devas, or the lower planes, there are huge variations. Some people are smart, some people are relatively slower in their reactions to the world, and also the retributive consciousness of humans and devas or animals, it has a huge difference. So, and this is definitely an effect of retribution. While the continuity of mind stream of humans or animals or devas, these are effects of uniform outflow. But these 8 dhatus, they are not effects of accumulation because they are not materials. You cannot say that you can have better, for example, you can have better consciousness only because you eat better food or you sleep better. Because consciousness is not material. It cannot be accumulated in a way like the atoms or particles. So you cannot say that. But of course, good food or good mood or good sleep, they will help your body to remain healthy. And that in turn can help you remain a good consciousness, a good health in consciousness. That can be explained. But the consciousness itself cannot be accumulated by food or sleep and so on. Then we also see that the visible form, like the odor and the taste, the tangible, these could be effects of 3. If they are within sentient continuum, meaning they are internal elements belonging to us, belonging to our continuum, they belonging to sentient beings, of course, then they can be of retribution. For example, how our skin tone, our texture appear. Like, are they smooth or are they rough? For example, this is also due to past karma, and that is an effect of retribution. It can also be of accumulation. For example, how we look like, the odor, taste, and tangibles, and our skin status, and so on. They can also be enhanced by diet, by sleep, by remedies, by these methods. So yes, they are also an effect of accumulation. And of course, they are also of uniform outflow because they're produced by similar causes. And we don't need to actually mention this effective uniform outflow, because just like the five sense faculties, they are already covered by the two, by the effect of retribution and of accumulation. But we know that they also have this effect of uniform outflow. And then the final category is those visible form, odor, taste, or tangible that are outside of the sentient continuum, like the external elements from mountains, rivers, oceans, and so on. So these the visible form, odor, taste, and tangibles of these things, they are of solely the effect of uniform outflow. It can never be the effect of retribution or accumulation, because the effect of retribution and the effect of accumulation are only applicable to sentient beings. This is very important to keep it in mind. These two are only applicable to sentient beings, or not just human, of course, but only applicable to sentient beings. While the effect of uniform outflow, it can be either. It can belong to sentient beings, it can belong to the outside, to the world outside, mountains, rivers, and so on. And next, let's take a look at this group of concepts: abandoning by vision, by cultivation, or not abandoning. Not to be abandoned. Okay? So which of the 18 dhatus are to be abandoned by the path of vision, and which are to be abandoned by the path of cultivation, which are not to be abandoned? Okay, the first category are those to be abandoned by the path of vision. Now we need to know, like, the definition is that through the path of seeing the noble truth and becoming a saint, that is the path of vision. So the last three dhatus, Mano Dhatu, Dhamma Dhatu, and the three, and the mental consciousness, these are the associated dhatus that can be abandoned by the path of vision. So to be more precise, we first have these 88 defilements to be abandoned by the path of vision, which are by nature the Dhamma Dhatu. They belong to the Dhamma Dhatu. And also the Mano Dhatu and the mental consciousness associated with these 88 defilements are also to be abandoned by vision. And then next, the category abandoned by the path of cultivation is the five, as we mentioned, the 15 dhatus, the 15 impure factors, impure dhatus, the five sense faculties, the five objects, and the five sense consciousnesses. These are all the way, these are always impure dhammas, and plus also other impure dhammas within the last three dhatus, within Mano Dhatu, Dhamma Dhatu, and mental consciousness, that are not to be abandoned by vision. So these together are those to be abandoned by the path of cultivation, because they do not involve mistaken views of the Four Truth, and they can be abandoned actually by both impure and pure paths, according to Sarvastivādas. Then we have the last category, not to be abandoned. So all pure dhammas within the last three dhatus, namely dhammas that form part of the noble truth or unconditioned factors. How can you abandon pure factors? You need them. So the core principles is that the 10 material dhatus, from eye to body, from visible form to the tangibles, and the five sense consciousness dhatus, they are exclusively abandoned through cultivation. While the last three dhatus, the Mano Dhatu, the Dhamma Dhatu, and the mental consciousness, they contain dhammas of three kinds, either to be abandoned by vision, or to be abandoned by cultivation, or not to be abandoned. So we actually have we do have some criteria on dhammas that are not to be abandoned by vision. So if you meet these kind of dhammas, you will know immediately they are not to be abandoned by vision. So maybe they are to be abandoned by cultivation. Maybe they are pure dhammas. So the first kind, if a dhamma is a non-defiled factor, meaning if it is a good or non-defined, it can never be a dhamma to be abandoned by the passive vision, because the factors to be abandoned by passive vision, they are defilement. They're defilements in nature. They have to be abandoned if you want to get rid of samsara, right? So if it is good or non-defined factors, they cannot be this type. The second type is that if it is not arising from the mental consciousness, if it is not arising or associated from the mental consciousness, for example, it is arising from or associated with your eye consciousness, well, that is not to be abandoned by the passive vision, because that will not involve any mistaken views. Your eye consciousness will have nothing to do with mistaken views of the Four Truths. Right? Your eye consciousness can see, can apprehend objects like colors and shapes, but it cannot relate to the views of the truth. That's not its function. Or any material elements. Any material elements, inside or outside, they can never be abandoned by the passive vision. Again, it has nothing to do with mistaken views. They can only be abandoned by the passive cultivation. Yeah, that is how we understand these 18 dhatus from the perspectives of abandoning or not to be abandoned. And that is the content for chapter 1. So let's recall. In this chapter, we have learned together a variety of things, including the conditioned, unconditioned, pure, impure factors, the 5 skandhas, 12 ayatanas, 18 dhatus, and 75 factors categorized in 5 different classes. We have also learned these different pairs of concepts, the categories of these 18 dhatus based on their different properties. We just put them into different classes. And this really helps us. And it is very important for us to understand the content that is following. The following chapters, we will need to recall some of these fundamental concepts and the meanings of these different dhammas and different dhatus, for example. Yeah. So that is the main content for chapter 1. In the next chapter, in chapter 2, we will discuss further of the faculties mentioned in chapter 1. Yeah, that is for now. Next, we will start chapter 2, the indriyas, namely the faculties.